Bachelor of Communications from University Science Malaysia and a Master of Philosophy from University of Malaya. Last but not least, we have with us Yang Berhormat Kasturi Pato, a Member of Parliament for Batu Kawan constituency in Penang since 2013 and the International Affairs Secretary for DAP Women. She is the daughter of the late Pato Perumal, a former senior DAP politician and Member of Parliament. YB Kasturi is famously known for advocating for female rights and is against race-based politics in the Malaysian Parliament. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to turn on their cameras for a quick photo session. Pia, has everybody turned on their cameras? Can you see?
Just Adrina, sorry, could you kindly switch on your camera?
There's a bit of lag coming from my side. Sorry for the delay.
No worries, thank you. All right, because I do not want to delay everybody from the event, I will just be counting down now from 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you very much once again.
All right, thank you everyone. Without further ado, I will pass the session over to our moderator, Pia.
Right. Thank you very much, Rashna, for that splendid introduction. Firstly, I would like to thank our speakers, YB Michelle Ong and Miss Nadia, and the audience for your time and patience, and also to our SPIR-Nott committee who have worked tiresomely for this event. Special thanks to you, Rashna, our event organizer and PR officer of the SPIR-Notts committee. Firstly, we are ecstatic to have all of you here today to welcome these established speakers to our forum. An important note for our panelists, please be mindful that if you wish to speak, you are encouraged to speak for at least 2 minutes before moving on to another panelist or a speaker, another panelist or question. This is due to the time constraints. You are also welcome to share personal experiences and encounters during your journey in politics. Unfortunately, YB Teresa and YB Michelle are expected to leave early at 8 p.m. So we will have a short Q&A session at 7:50 for YB Michelle and YB Teresa. This will also be a very short Q&A session with other speakers as well if they would like to join in. There will also be another Q&A session before the end of our event, so don't worry if you've missed out on the first part. And as for the final note, before we begin, please remember to complete our feedback form in which we will provide the link in our chat box. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first section of our panel. So the topic is current status of women in politics in Malaysia. The first question I would like to open to the floor is, how did you become actively involved in your position? Firstly, let us welcome Ms. Nadia to answer this.
Oh, hi. I think for me, because I feel like I'm the least experienced person on the panel by virtue of profession. So for me, I've always had a minor interest in politics due to my parents' work in the civil service. So my late father worked as an architect in the Sarawak Public Housing Agency, and my mom is currently still teaching in national school. But I think for me personally, I see GE14 as a point of like proper political discovery for me, because when we managed to switch governments, there were a bit more freedom to explore, and especially for me because I'm from Sarawak, so like there are certain opportunities that are not open for me unless I move out from the state. So basically GE14 happened, and then I joined a PKR internship for like 2 months. It was during their contentious party election. So after that, I decided that maybe for now, party politics is not for me yet. But I continued repertorying for NGOs such as like Sisters in Islam and Arrow. But I think my actual turning point in like pushing me to be more involved in political advocacy was really my dad's sudden passing in May last year, because my mom is not Sarawakian, so we had to go through a lot of like legal troubles, and I actually saw my mom. I actually saw a state immigration officer shouting at my mom for not applying for a Sarawakian PR before my dad died. So personally, that was very affecting for me. But with regards to my own involvement with UNI 18, for me, I didn't come from a student activist or student leadership background. So how I got involved with UNI 18 was mostly because they were my friends. So they kind of just tarik you along to join stuff. And my previous experiences of volunteering has always been aligned with like personal interest, because I couldn't see myself occupying that leadership space. I think for me, partly because I studied in SMKA, so basically religious school for like 11 years. And in that system, I think you're expected to fit a certain mold, which then I would say, in terms of opportunities for women to lead in certain spaces, at least from my observation as a lay person, you know, in women-dominated spaces like education, medicine, it's very common, but not so much in fields like engineering, because I have friends who are like mechanical engineers, and because they are women, so it's very hard for them to enter the market or retain their jobs once they get married or have families. And especially politics, which I think YB Michelle can talk more about. And I think this is where I would like to touch a bit on the Sarawak political context, just because it's where I grew up in, and because it's my pet project in Undi Sarawak. So according to DOSM, you know, the female population in Sarawak is basically 48.1%. But currently in the Sarawak Dun, we only have 7 female aduns out of like occupying 82 seats, which is only like 8.5%. So at least 2 of them are from DAP, and the others would be from GPS, which is the ruling coalition in Sarawak. And in the Sarawak cabinet, only one of the core 11 cabinet members is a woman, and she holds the welfare, community, and women portfolio, while the other two like assistant ministers, one is basically her deputy, and the other one is in charge of law and state federal relations. So I think that if we want to see more women participate in politics and decision making, you kind of have to force that structural change, because you can try to do other stuff like changing the culture, changing the society, but it won't work unless you change the structure itself. And I think because of our country's like composition of Malay Muslim majority, so religious arguments get used a lot to, discourage women participation in politics. Yeah, so I'll probably speak about that in like the second part of the question sessions. So that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for your active contributions and your commemorable efforts in politics. That is one thing we would like to thank you for. And it is definitely agreeable that the hierarchical system in Malaysia is very segregated and at most marginalized for peripheral communities such as, women in general. It is very systemic. There is a systemic and ingrained system of patriarchy, which is something that women have to fight actively to undermine, per se. So thank you once again for your contributions. We would like to proceed. Yes,
sorry for interrupting, but I would like to welcome YB Teresa to our panel. She's arrived.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for that, and welcome, YB Teresa. Thank you so much for joining us. Prior to moving on to our other question, we would also like to call in YB Michelle and YB Teresa to answer the following questions. How did you come to be actively involved in your position? So the floor is for the both of you. Anyone may start first. Thank you.
Teresa, you want to go first? Okay, then I would go first. I just want to thank you guys for having me on this panel and just to share a bit about how I came to be where I am today. I suppose before I talk about how I took up this position as the assemblyman, I just want to shed a bit of light on why I felt that politics was something important, and it's actually a lifetime journey. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a gradual realization, and I suppose that I was privileged enough to have my family, and namely my parents, who were actively there to inform me about the current situation of our country and how it actually relates to where I am, even as young as a child. So I suppose my, if you can say, political awakening happened when I was 12. And that happened because when I was 12, my parents decided to take us on, they called it a holiday, to New Zealand. And it was our first overseas holiday. And so you can imagine that we were quite excited. I say we because I'm the eldest in the family. And there is my sister, my youngest sister, my two younger brothers. So it was our first time overseas, and I know my dad especially to be a very prudent man, especially when it comes to finances. But one thing I noticed was every town that we went to visit, he would go to a bank. And for me, that was very curious because in my mind, I'm thinking, are we always running out of money that daddy always has to go to a bank? And I felt it appropriate to ask my mom at that time, what is going on? Because this doesn't look like a normal holiday. And she was very honest with me. She said that we are actually looking at New Zealand as a place that we want to move to. And at this time, I'm not sure whether many of you experienced it, but I did, where a lot of our family friends decided to migrate to Canada, to Australia, to the UK, and different places. And so my parents was caught up in that because the discussion among their circles was that there was no future in Malaysia. Your children will not do well in Malaysia. The education system is not good, so on and so forth. So they tried to explain to 12-year-old me in those terms that they were doing this for me. But the simple-minded me, being in primary school then, couldn't understand it. Because at that time, when I was, all I was taught is if there is a problem, and what my parents was describing to me was a problem, you solve it, you don't run away from it. And yet I saw the exact opposite in what they were doing by exploring New Zealand. So that didn't make sense to me. Somehow or other, things didn't fall through. And so we stayed in Malaysia, and I went through the education system. And by this time, I saw many things that was happening in the country. I saw how, the politically it could have been a lot better. Even regular conversations over the dinner table, when my dad would ask me things like, what are you learning for geography? And are you, in Form 4 and Form 5, he said that you are already expected to learn world geography. So are you taught about, how many continents we have? How many, if you talk about history, are you talking about, have you learned about the Cold War, things like that? And when he asked me these questions, I felt taken aback, because after going through many years of education, I realized that I hadn't learned those things. And I felt very shortchanged. And then he explained to me that there were these people called politicians that basically decide how the education structure should be, and therefore impacted what I was learning at that time. And so I got exposed to these kind of things at a very young age. So fast forward, I decided to do law and went to the UK. And by this time, I think for many of you as well, being in Nottingham, if you're going over for a training program or whatnot, that door is open for you to stay in the UK, because you can quite easily apply for jobs there. It becomes a lot more accessible. And so me and my peers, we were sort of caught up in that, but I was very torn because I did law because of what was happening in my country. And I wanted to contribute one day to what was happening there. So I felt very conflicted that, I'm here in the UK because of what's happening back home, and yet I'm not going back to fulfill it, right? But I was bombarded by my parents and their peers, all advising me that I was giving up a huge opportunity otherwise. And I was being very unwise with my decision to not stay in the UK, They say 1 hour that you work in the UK, you're already earning 5 times more than what you'll be earning back home in Malaysia. So why is it that you're being so unwise about things like that? So I did try to apply for jobs. And as I went through the interview process, they were asked things like, and so I applied to law firms, and they were asked things like, so why are you interested in working with us? And when they asked things like that, it was a sudden realization that I was not interested, because I couldn't force myself to lie. And that also made me realize that I was really passionate about what was going on back home. And so they would also ask me things like, what do you think in the UK legal system should change? And the answers didn't come. In my mind, all that I was thinking of was what can change in Malaysia. And so that was an epiphany. And at the end of it, I had to really ask myself a very serious question, which was, Michelle, can you do something about what is going on in Malaysia, even though it is really small? And the answer was yes. Even though if I come back as a lawyer, I could do pro bono cases, I could serve and try to change the legal system that way. And then I asked myself the second question of, Michelle, are you able to forgive yourself if you worked in the UK and never came back home and never fulfilled what you really wanted to do in the first place? And the answer quite easily was no. So having realized that, I decided to call my parents. And at that time it was Skype. There were no Google Meets or Zoom. And I said to them, I'm buying a ticket back home. And I literally could hear their hearts break from many miles across the sea. And they said, okay, fine, we will respect your decision. And I came home and I started practicing. So I did civil law. And that's where I met a lot of politicians that were caught up in different legal cases, whether it was the Public Assembly Act, whether it was sedition, whether it was defamation, 1MDB, all that kind of thing. And so that opened the door for me. To meet them, to know about who they are, and really interact with them. And so actually, to be very honest with you, I was very happy doing law. And I told myself, Michelle, when it comes to politics, you need to be financially stable. You need to, have your affairs in order before you jump into it. So give yourself 10 years practicing law, and then only consider whether you want to pursue politics. So that means only by 34 was supposed to be the deadline where I started seriously thinking about politics. But before the last general elections, and by this time I was working already with Gobin and had quite a lot of exposure when it comes to public interest litigation. The door opened, and the DAP leadership said, "Would you consider running in Subang Jaya?" And to be very honest with them, I said, I don't think I'm ready. I took a very long time to get back to them. Came to a point where they were saying, do you really want to even consider it? Because we're not hearing any answer from you. And I said, I can't just pluck myself out from where I am, right? It's very difficult. But after thinking about it, I felt like I'm still young, and that's actually an advantage, because if I so do make a decision that is wrong, in a sense of, jumping into politics too soon, I still have time later on to fix things. And I have 4 years in law, which provides me sufficient background. It's like riding a bicycle, I can go back. So I decided, okay, I'll give this a shot. And by that time, to be honest with you, I didn't even know that I was running in Subang Jaya. I only knew I was running in Subang Jaya 1 week before nominations. But before that, I was really prepared to go wherever the party wherever the party wanted to put me, and that remains true till today. And so we ran, and we won Selangor, and at that time we won the federal government, which was such a turning point. And that's basically the long story of how I came to where I am today. Yeah.
Thank you very much, YB Michelle. That was actually a very inspirational and heartfelt story. I just want to say thank you also for sharing such a vulnerable, sorry, that was my dog, a very vulnerable story for us. I would also like to lead up to another question. So do you believe that educated, qualified women lack the space and relevant opportunities to thrive in decision-making roles? So could this also be applied to perhaps economic activities?
I think it's a combination of a few factors. If you talk about opportunities being actively open for women, I think, of course, we could definitely do better. The statistics demonstrate that in terms of women being in decision-making powers. So from our experience, at least my experience in DAP, actually, I'm very fortunate to have leaders and a party structure that actively thinks about women and actively think about, are we actually putting enough women in decision-making position? And I think what needs to be done, not just at the party level, but at every level, is for all organizations to consciously have that in the forefront of their minds, so that they would actively get women involved. Without that, I do notice that we may slack in that area, and perhaps that is where we are lacking as a society, that awareness and that need and that active thinking about women when it comes to filling those positions. Now, I definitely do think that when it comes to politics, definitely we can do better. We have 50% of women in Malaysia, and that's definitely not reflected in any level of the State Assembly or in Parliament or in the Senate at all. Even when it comes to councillors as well, I can dare say that Selangor is considered one of the more progressive ones, and we do actively think about whether we are whether we are putting more women in decision-making powers, but we are still a far cry from where we need to be. So I do sympathize with what Nadia said earlier, that unless you have a systemic change, it is very difficult to break those barriers. Though at the same time, I'm also conscious about the fact that if you do force it, you might compromise. You might compromise certain things, and I don't want that to happen. So how is it that we do it? Do we say 30% and force a 30%, or do we aim for 30% and work towards it? And then once we reach 30%, we actively push for 40% and 50%. Is this something static or is this something dynamic? These are questions that remain unanswered, but we definitely as a society need to address our minds too.
Thank you very much, YB Michelle, for that. We would also like to welcome YB Teresa to the floor as well. So we would like to firstly ask you, how did you come to be actively involved in your position? So the floor is yours.
Okay, first of all, thanks for inviting me to this forum. But I have to leave at 8 p.m. So later, if you have one question, you quickly ask me. Then the rest, I leave it to you. Because my friend's birthday party, I just come to know about it this morning. So sorry. Okay, I would like to start by telling you that I never thought of joining politics. When I joined the DAP just a few months after I graduated from uh, university. That was at USM. I studied in the School of Communication. You're from Nottingham University, right? I think one of your lecturer, Professor Zaharum Naik, he was my former lecturer in the University of Science, Penang, and he is also one of those who had a great impact in my to me. Okay, the reason I chose the School of Communication was because I think I watched too many movies on the heroes in the journalists who are heroes, and I think all these movies somehow had influenced me when I come to university, when I choose the university or the schools that I want to join. But when I graduated, that was in 1990. Uh, I uh, I actually had done internship in RTM in Nanyang Sampao. But then after I'd done the internship, I decided that I do not want to be a journalist because as journalist, I just see things happening in front of me and I cannot participate because if you are a journalist, you're supposed to be objective, to be neutral, right? So then when I came out from Penang and back to KL, that was a general election, a few months prior to general election. In 1990, first time in the history of Malaysia where UMNO was split into two. At that time, Tengku Razaleigh failed to challenge Dr. Mahathir in the party, and he came out and formed Semangat 46, his political party. Then DAP at that time joined Tengku Razaleigh, formed Gagasan Rakyat, and the Semangat 46 also joined with PAS in the East Coast. So that was a very exciting time. More of course, we have May 9, 2018. Nothing more exciting than, in 2018. But at that time, when I came back to KL, that was very exciting time. So at that time, the Chinese community, the Chinese NGOs like Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall, so they were talking about to have two coalition system, to forge the two coalition system in Malaysia, to be like US, the presidential campaign that we have observed in the last half a year, so that Malaysia so that we can enhance democratization in Malaysia. So at that time, they come up with a slogan that was forge, strengthen opposition parties to forge the two coalition system. In Mandarin is 壮大反对党，促成两县制 at that time. So I came back, I joined, I decided to help out. Dr. Kwa Kia Song, he was a former ISA detainee, and he represented the Dong Jiao Zhong at that time, the Chinese educationist joining DAP. So I helped him in his election campaign in Petaling Jaya in 1990, and after that he won. And that helping out in the election, that experience really shocked me. So after that, I was invited to join the party and full time to work as Lim Kee Siang's political secretary together with YB Datuk Teng Chang Kit, the senior ESCO of Selangor now. So that's how two of us came into the party, and now this year is 2020, so 30 years in the party, and I became MP in 1999, and I was in the Four Corner fight. I just want to mention this because it has something to do with women. I was in the Four Corner fights in Seputeh parliamentary constituency. Actually, I contested in 1995 in Ipoh Barat, I lost. So in 1999, one of my major contestant was the MCA guy called Dr. Swa. And I faced the former MP for Seputeh, New Akim, and also another independent Indian guy. What made that election interesting was when I was a helicopter came into that constituency, a bit like Michelle, about 1 week before nomination day, I was put there. And when I opened my eyes to look at all the banners in my constituency, in Old Glen Road, Happy Garden, and all these areas, you will see that they put the rocket and the moon, and then they put if past come to power, there will be no future for women, no future for the non-Muslim and so on. Because in 1999, it was the reformasi time. Anwar and Lim Guan Eng, they were all they were in jail, and the DAP first time worked together with PAS, and so on. So they play this religious, sentiment to the fullest in this Chinese dominated constituency, Seputeh. So a lot of people bet I'm going to lose the election, although Seputeh is a DAP stronghold all these years. Then come to the 4th day of the election campaign. My major component from MCA, Dr. Swa. So he attended the MCA Wanita fundraising or election campaign program, a dinner program. So he was invited to speak. Then I think he was a bit drunk. Then, he told the crowd, he said, I am a PhD holder. The Lisa got only a master degree, holder, and I don't know where she got her master degree to. So PhD and master degree, there is a vast difference. So I'm better than her. Number 2, he said, I'm a man. I stand. She's a woman. She has to squat. So I'm better than her. Then another third thing is that he said, well, I have served in this constituency for 4 years. If I don't get elected, I won't serve the people anymore. So he made this a fantastic speech. Then I think he was a bit drunk, maybe. Then the reporters, the time we started to have a lot of journalists who are women. So they went to him and said, Dr. Swa, can we write what you say? Then he said, just report. Okay, then come out in the color national page, in China Press and a lot of major Chinese dailies. That really made the constituents in my constituency started to look at me, started to realize that, there is a woman standing in this constituency, new face, and they were so angry. And at that time, there was an uproar of anger against this Dr. Swa, this candidate from MCA, because he humiliated women. I started to receive, that time no SMS yet, faxes, letters, and fax to me, sent to me and say, I will support you because my mother is a woman, my wife is a woman, and my daughter is a woman. I received a lot of these kind of messages from men. Then it came out like it became quite a major issue in Chinese media. So at that time, Lim Kisiang asked all the DAP candidates, quite throughout the country to question, because most of us contested against MCA at that time, question the MCA candidate whether they agree with the statement of Dr. Swa or not. Then when this appeared in the media, a lot of people called MCA and scolded their MCA candidates throughout the country. Although at that time MCA was at the upper hand because of the Islamic, we DAP worked with PAS at that issue. So under MCA, the operation center, there are people who took the phone call because they do not know how to handle all the angry voices, all the criticism. So MCA, they ended up that quarrel with those who call the service center. So after that, MCA headquarters has to step in, and Michael Chong has to step in, and they ordered all the MCA candidates, those angry phone calls must channel to the MCA headquarters. So they set up a special hotline to handle the angry voters who called MCA to scold them. So that was the fourth day. At that time, I think we have, I'm not sure, about 9 days, campaigning days, 9 days. So then 2 days later, no choice, Michael Chong called the Dr. Swa, the MCA candidate in Sapute, call him, to have a press conference and force him to apologize. So this Dr. Swa apologized. He said, I apologize to all women who feel offended, but I don't want to apologize to Teresa Kok, So I kept quiet. I had to show that I'm magnanimous. I say, okay, I accept his apology. But that was a bit too late because it was about 3 days prior to polling day. Then I won with 5,200 votes, majority, 5,200 votes. Actually, if you look at the betting, at that time in Sapute constituency, some of them bet that I would lose in the election because of 4 corner fights, because I was a new face, and because the former MP did not serve the constituency well, so a lot of people are unhappy with the DAP. So I won. I won because of a woman candidate. So I'm now the MP for 20 years. This is my 5th term in the Malaysian Parliament. I can also share with you that being a woman MP, yes, I do talk about women's issue. But all this while, since day one, I told myself that I shouldn't be the Wakil Rakyat that champion for women only. I should be the Wakil Rakyat for all. So I purposely let my other colleagues, because in that year, suddenly DAP got 3 women MPs. That was myself, YB Chong Ing, and YB Fong Po Kwan. She was the youngest MP, woman MP at that time. So I let them argue over the women's issue and so on. I do speak about women's issue, but I try to look for those issues that very few MPs discuss about. For example, like indigenous people in Sarawak. At that time, there was a Bakun Dam. The government wanted to build Bakun Dam, and there was some environmental concern, the Orang Asal, their rights, and so on. So I picked all these issues, and I also picked these certain issues that propagated by NGOs, but very few MPs talk about it at that time. So I chose that kind of issues so that I will be seen as an MP for all, and not the MP because I'm a Chinese, so always talk about Chinese issue. No, I talk about Indian issue, the indigenous people issue, environmental issues, education, and so on. And so that to tell the public that as being a women MPs, besides women issues, there are so many things that we can champion, we can talk about. So anyway, if any question, I'm happy to answer.
Sorry, Tia, for interrupting once again. I would like to invite YB Kasturi to our panel.
Right. Welcome to you indeed, YB Kasturi. Thank you very much for joining us. And prior to proceeding to your time to speak, YB Kasturi, we would like to also mention to YB Teresa, thank you very much for your personal experiences shared. So it seems that sexism was and still is very prevalent in the Malaysian politics and indeed systemically. So which leads me to my next question to you. Is the rhetoric of women empowerment sufficient to make necessary changes in Malaysia?
You're talking about sexism in parliament?
In general, perhaps. Like, would female empowerment be sufficient to overcome this obstacle?
Well, okay, you're touching on a very broad issue. I think I try to just narrow it down. It'll be easier to talk. Okay, I think Kasturi had experienced some, sexist remarks and all that in Dewan Rakyat. I can tell you that when suddenly DAP had, first time in the history of DAP, suddenly we had 3 women MPs. Well, I tell you, we face all these sexist remarks all the time because we were the minorities. So at that time, although one Aziza, because of her husband went to jail, so she was, in parliament, but she was highly regarded. All the UMNO men, they did not touch her because of, she's a tudung, she wears tudung, and they, respect her and so on. But, the 3 women MPs from the DAP, they see we are the easy targets. So whenever they talk anything, they will talk about marriage. We are not. When I spoke out and talk about, for example, like single mothers issue, then you will have one or two male MPs stood up and say, "Hey, you got tak kahwin lah, you're not married lah, you're not qualified to talk about single mothers issue." Ha 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 ha. Then they will laugh at it, and they will make all these remarks at laughing at me for being single, laugh at me for and all sorts. We really kena kau and always catch headlines in the media at that time. So now I want to when you ask me how do I handle it, we have to face it. If a woman MP being harassed, we face sexual remarks in the parliament. Hey, how about ordinary women, in the society? We all face the same problems also. So I take it as of course we continue to fight against all these sexist remarks. So life goes on, but until today, even Kasturi, until today they still also make fun of women every now and then. Okay, you talk about women empowerment. Who is that? Yeah, Kasturi. I think it's up to us, how do we perform, And those days, I must say that, when you are the minority as women in the DAP, there were so few women at the time. Many women did not join DAP because DAP is an opposition party. I can also tell you that my parents, they scolded me for 5 years after I worked with the DAP, after I graduated. They say nobody is going to hire you. You are from the opposition party. You might go to jail anytime, blah, 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 blah. I get scolded for 5 years. And after I had to move out from my parents' house and stay outside so that I don't need to listen to all this criticism. Okay. And how to be in politics and same like in other careers, all up to us whether we take initiative to do things or not. I can tell you that I can always claim that I'm a woman MP, I'm the minority in the party, therefore I don't need to do much. As long as I'm woman, I fill up the quota, so the party needs woman. I don't need to work so hard. I can tell you some of our MPs already take things for granted. They think that they are very long in the parliament, so they don't need to fight like those days when they were young and so on. But I still make a point to visit my constituency. I still fight. I still take up issues. Take up to what they call it, walk extra miles. So I know many of you are university students. My advice to you is that if you want not only in politics, if one day you come out to work, you want to grow, you want to go high up, there is only one way, no shortcut. That is to work harder. That is to perform. That is to show that you are someone with quality. You are hardworking. You are a responsible person. You are a caring person. You are blah blah blah. You have to show all these qualities that let your boss have no choice but to keep promoting you, and you command the respect of your colleagues. So for me, I can also tell you that after I became a minister, cabinet minister finally, for 18 months only, then the government's collapsed. I can tell you that the remarks from my ministry officers, after I'm no more in the government, then I heard from my former confidential secretary, where she said, some of the ministry officers quietly went to tell her, can you ask your boss, ask the ministers, don't work so hard, because we almost couldn't catch up her pace. Actually, I felt very happy to hear that because they asked me not to work so hard. That means you leave what do you call that? You can say a name to all the government officers. You work very hard, and they have to catch up because when the minister goes anywhere, they have to prepare the text. They have to clear the area. They have to do a lot of this what do you call that, background, open the way for me to go there. So then the whole ministry, all these officers, they have to work very hard. And then also my advice to all our young friends here, if you want to be successful in your career, okay, Michelle is in a legal firm. Being a lawyer, you need to be very detailed, right? You have to really check the documents and make sure no mistake, no spelling error, no this, and that. And also for all our young ladies in this forum, I would like to advise you to learn to be detailed, like Michelle, as a lawyer, you need to be detailed, to look into detail. You can have grand plan to organize big conference, big projects, big this, and that. But sometimes when you neglect certain details, certain a small matter, actually a small matter, the whole thing could be a flop. I just give you an example. Michelle, and Kasturi, during the election time, ceramah, right? Okay, ceramah. If you don't have good sound system, your whole ceramah flop. You can have many thousand people coming in, but in the whole thing flop. And also, I always ask my staff, prepare spare mics, prepare even the spare generator, just in case there is rain. If your generator, cannot not functioning, you have the spare one. So all these are the details that we are talking about. So my advice to all our future, maybe you're a politician, maybe you're a businesswoman, maybe you are professionals, one thing, few advice. Number one is work extra mile. Work as hard as you can if you want to climb up the so-called being empowered or climb up, or break the glass ceiling or whatever you name it. Number two, look into details. Okay, number three, you don't always regard yourself because I'm a woman. That's why I need to be given special attention. That's why I should, fill the quota and so on. Certain companies they have the quota for women in the top management and so on. No, never think of that. You must work. Use your quality, your efforts to convince your bosses, convince your clients, to hire you because you are special. You work very hard. You care. You're concerned, and because they see you as a very responsible person, therefore they will continue to hire you to promote you. Okay, so I just end here.
Thank you very much, YB Teresa. So it seems a lot that meritocracy and being detail-orientated are the answers for a woman's success. Thank you very much for that advice. Now we would like to welcome the floor to YB Kasturi. So prior to your floor question, we would just like to inform you that there will be a short Q&A session at 7:50 for YB Michelle and for YB Teresa as they would have to leave. So let us proceed with your question. So the first that we would like to ask you is, how did you come to be actively involved in your position?
Hi everyone, and to Saudari Teresa, Michelle, and all the young aspiring leaders out there. Please, can you all hear me?
Yes, why don't you show your video?
I'm driving lah.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just not very far from home, so I should be home in a bit. But my story is a bit different from Teresa's story. I was fortunate to be born into a political family. Or I would always say that I was born into the party. My late father was a member of parliament and state assemblyman. My mother was the first secretary for Wanita DAP when it was formed. So you can say that exposure to politics was already there from a very young age. My dad used to take us for all his charamas, his campaigns, and we used to observe things by ourselves with our young minds and our young eyes. And one of the few things that I think my sister and I really observed was the great social injustice that we saw, how some families live lives the way they live, and how some families, like in estates and Orang Asli areas, how they live their lives. And at a young age, I couldn't understand why there was such a great difference in how people live their lives. And as I started to understand and ask questions, then it dawned upon me that this big gap of how people live their lives, the socioeconomic status, had a lot to do with how money had been siphoned, corruption, abuse of power. And when you're exposed to that for so long, so young, it stays and it sticks with you. And and also I always felt that I didn't want to be a spectator. I didn't want to see all this action in front of me, change, the movement, the rallies, the protests. I wanted to be a part of it. And I think that stemmed my interest in politics. From a very young age, when the teacher used to ask, like standard 1, standard 2, when your teacher asks you, okay, besar nanti nak jadi apa? I would always say ahli politik. Even though I didn't really know what exactly it was, only that I saw what my father did. But it was something that I saw myself doing, or I had an affinity towards it. And so I also saw how my mother juggled being a housewife also at home, but how she was also supportive to my dad. And so that's basically how that piqued my interest. And also, it was a very interesting time. I'm 41, so I was born in 79, which meant that I went through the whole Operasi Lalang time into the 90s, into being a university student where when there was the Barisan Alternative period, when there was the Semangat 46 period in 1990. So yeah, you see all this and they unfold before your eyes. And that just drew me closer to politics. But unlike Teresa, I didn't do politics. I did study politics. I did microbiology in UM because I like science also. So yeah, but I think to young people out there, I think that you shouldn't only cocoon yourself into your interest in politics, your ability or your vision to be in politics shouldn't just make you only want to do political science or to study only subjects related to that. Many of the leaders in this country have a journalist, mass communication background. Some come from an activist background. Some did law, some did political science. Some were teachers, etc. My late father was a teacher before he joined politics. So I think it is all of y'all are at an interesting time, at an interesting age. Not talking about COVID alone, but then it's a very exciting period, for you to learn as much as you can. Because if you aspire to join politics, then you are a policy maker, you are a lawmaker. What you speak and what you push for, your agenda in parliament, whether it's for women or not, affects the man on the street, will affect every single person in the country. So you should be as well read as you can possibly be. Don't use role models who have blinders on their eyes, people who just focus on one thing and one thing alone. Look up, pick your role models, pick your leaders, those who have spoken on many different issues, like what Teresa said, that yes, she's a female MP. Yes, it's undeniable she's a woman, but she's also MP for all, and she touches on issues that are not very mainstream issues maybe, or could be unpopular issues until an MP speaks about it, and then it becomes a popular issue. So that is also something that I've been doing, and I'm new to the parliament, which meant that I really look up to people like Teresa, Saudara Kit Siang, Saudara Guan Eng, Saudara Gobin, people like even Webby Charles Santiago, who normally takes up very sticky, sensitive subjects also, but you need to speak about these issues. So yeah.
Thank you very much, YB Kasturi, for sharing your experiences. It is definitely imperative to be multifaceted, especially as a woman. So given the fact that we have a lot of reciprocal contingencies, ripple effects in society. So in addition, of course, coming back to your point, it is truly disappointing to witness socioeconomic injustice and disparities in Malaysia, especially with the fact that many Malaysians are victims to the abuse of power and sovereignty in Malaysia. So also to move forward with a question for you, would you say that educated and qualified women lack the space and relevant opportunities to thrive in decision-making roles, such as the parliament?
I think if you want to talk about the parliament and you want to talk about women who've made it to parliament, that's a different subject altogether versus women who are educated, who are not in politics and not in parliament. I think these are two separate subjects. But having said that, I think definitely, having that knowledge, having that experience, having that sort of expertise gives you an advantage and an upper hand as a woman in parliament. There are many issues that sometimes when a female's voice speaks about it, it's different. The subject may be the same. You could be speaking about transportation, you could be speaking about trade, but the angle and the aspect many times that a female takes could be somewhat different and refreshing from how a male counterpart may address the issue. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I also want to add that if you think that why you hear so many women, so many issues these days regarding women, regarding children, regarding family development, is that this is the period that we've had the highest number of female MPs in parliament on both sides, and therefore you have many issues that women champion that are women's issues, family development, children's issues, etc. I think this sitting, I remember YB Teresa highlighted about prison reforms and the number of detainees in prison, etc. We often forget about female prisoners. And when female prisoners are released, how do they adapt back into society? Or how do women whose husbands or partners or spouses or family members are in prison, how are these women dealing with it then? So it's not a subject on women empowerment, but it addresses issues that women face, but maybe not mainstream or popular issues. But when someone like YB Teresa speaks about it in parliament, it gets that due attention and it gets that due recognition. And somebody out there will say, hey, my husband's in prison. Someone in parliament spoke for me today. So I think I don't know if I answered your question. If you have knowledge and if you have education, particularly if you're a policy maker, you have to do your homework. And as what YB Teresa said, you have to work hard, shortcuts. And if you are a seat warmer, if you have come in because you think that you have come in on a female quota, you'll be very easily replaced by a more capable and better male or female candidate. So I think there's a lot of burden on the shoulders of women elected representatives to ensure that they also perform well, so that there will be nobody out there who would say, yeah, this is what you get when you elect a female elected rep. This is what happens when you put a female in that place, as an adun, as an MP, as a councillor. This is what you get. So I think we have to live up to that sort of standards, to live up to your own standards, to live up to the standards of your party. A party like DAP, it's for a person. I consider myself born into the party, and to me it is very high expectations. It's like trying to get good grades so that your parents will be proud of you, and that's what a lot of us aim to do. Also, any good work that we do reflects on the teachings of the party, what the party stands for. The principles of the party, the struggle of the party, etc. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Even though we are a little bit more early towards the Q&A time, we would like to open the floor for all the participants to ask our panelists some questions prior to YB Michelle and YB Teresa having to leave. So the floor is yours. Would anyone like to ask any questions?
Nobody, you are speechless. Okay, I would like to just suggest, when I was a university student at that time, I was quite, I must say that I was an activist in campus. So every time during the semester break or long break, I usually will make myself busy by, last time I studied journalism, that's why I can get attached in newspapers, Nanyang Sampao, RTN, TV section, and so on. I take initiative to also approach the NGOs. So, for example, like during my time, the NGOs like Awam, the women's NGO, they were, fighting very hard on the Domestic Violence Act. At that time, because there are some Muslim MPs, they don't agree to such law because they argue that in Islam it's okay for a husband to beat up the wife as a kind of give them a lesson. Okay, so I remember I took one holiday, long holiday. So I went to do a documentary on domestic violence, and I managed to get the footage even from RTM because when I attached to them, I volunteered myself to do a documentary like that, and finally they really aired it for 8 minutes, in the news time. It was such a recognition for me at the time. So I would like to suggest that during the break, maybe you might want to attach in with Michelle. Michelle's a service center. Follow her in and out of court in the service center and look at her how she entertain, people, how to handle complaints and so on. And you can also, attach to my office. But I must qualify by telling you that this is the CMCO, that this whole year is very miserable. Not many activities that we organize, we can organize, and we can't really do like last time, like really go to the ground, organize programs and so on. Now, because of COVID, we can't do that. But I think it is something that you all can consider. You can just write in. You can just write in there. And sometimes I do receive requests from students who study, Malaysian students study abroad. They came back for holiday and then they attach to our office, maybe 1 month and so on. And also under the government, they have the fellow Perdana, where they let the select certain students attached to minister office, deputy minister's office, or maybe the ministry, our ministry. And also last year, I remember Syed Saddiq, it was Syed Saddiq, he even arranged, certain selected students to attach to some big firms like Petronas, Shell, to follow the CEO, to observe, how they, perform and so on. So I'd like to encourage that I see there are many women here. So you are listening to the women politicians telling about our stories. Maybe it also is good for you all to come to attach to our office. I think our door is always open. Okay.
Thank you very much, YB Teresa. That was actually very empowering and welcoming of you. There is someone who would like to ask YB Michelle a question. Gracieli, would you like to ask a question?
Thanks, Tia. Hi, I'm Gracieli, and I have a question directed to YB Michelle. And first off, amazing story. I'm from Subang, and I absolutely love Subang. So hearing that you were speaking today was a very big thing for me. But I was wondering, and I know I speak for many here, when I'm just curious regarding YB Teresa's point on how it would be possible to apply for internships or volunteer programs in this regard. Because I feel like a lot of us don't have the information to go forth with the application process because it's not very publicly announced and whatnot.
Yeah, okay. So what my office has a principle where we try not to reject interns if we have the space for it. So it's very simple actually. Just write into me, attach your CV so I know a little bit about you. If you can include just a simple write-up about why you want to do an internship with us, of course, that would top some marks. And then I would arrange for a chat with you just to get to know you better and what your expectations are, what you hope to gain from the internship, just to get you up to speed with what you would be involved in as well. And then we will arrange a time for you to come in. Now, what YB Teresa said is actually quite true. Previously, at one point, I would be able to take in like 6-7 interns, and I remember there was this girl from she was studying law, and she lives in USG too, and I told her, I really have no space anymore, like physical space. I cannot find any space for you. There's no space for you to sit. And she said, no, I really wanted to do it. And so we took her in, and that was before COVID happened. So we try to be as accommodating as possible when we can. However, given the restrictions, we take in a maximum of 3 at a time. And we have been filled up until February already. We do have people already applying for June and July. So if you can get in your application early, of course, we'll be able to secure your desired spot earlier as well. Yeah. So it's very simple. Just write into me. My email address is on all my social media platforms. Very easily available.
All right. Thank you, Ivy.
Oh, thank you.
I also I want to give a suggestion. Like some of you can go through, maybe Michelle can help them, that our ADUN, our ESCO, we can put them in the local council. We can talk to the mayor, put them in local council so that they know the operation of the local council, the government's agencies. This is something, but you please don't go in and think that, wow, it's very dramatic lah and all that. No, sometimes it could be very boring. But it doesn't matter. This is an exposure to you. I think this is something that we think we can arrange. Oh, Michelle, if you have a lot of followers, fans, you can talk to YB Sihan, and maybe you can ask her, see where do they stay. You can put in MPPJ, MPSJ, and let them play, some role in those local councils.
Yeah, definitely we can look into it. Actually, through DAP, I think every year, the last one Suchi did it, where we get applications from the public, and then we will put them with MPs and ADUNs. I think it also can be extended to councillors. We have a lot of councillors in Selangor and in Penang. That would be a good idea. But this idea of putting them in local government also, I will speak to Zihan about it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, YB Michelle and YB Teresa, for your generosity as well as your advice. In fact, if you were to look at the chat right now, YB Teresa, Alia would like to thank you, and you've actually answered a question before she could even ask you. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I do have a question, if you can hear me.
Yes, Benedict, please ask.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Maybe I can switch on the camera. Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, YB Michelle, YB Teresa, all of this panel. Thank you. I have a question, because we're really interested when we talk about women empowerment and getting more women to participate either in politics or in the parliament more specifically. So I'm interested in looking at the specifics of this big word, women empowerment. Would you think, and this question is addressed to everyone here, would you think that, for example, applying quotas would generate maybe a greater interest in women, arise a greater interest in women to participate and be part of the parliament and be more engaged in politics? Or on the other hand, would it rather discourage those who, not necessarily the better candidates, but those who are probably better suited to do the job, who are being taken aback because of those quotas? Because the quotas would basically mean that people are legally binded by this idea that we need to have a certain amount of women in the parliament, or women and men in this case. But then again, as we've already mentioned earlier, we can only solve issues that we're able to verbalize first. So even if we don't have the solutions, I think it's worth asking us a question. Would you say that quotas here would be a necessary solution here, or maybe just a first step towards achieving greater equality in politics? I mean, what is your take on that? Thank you.
Okay, if you talk about quota for the DAP, we have amended our party constitution. In the coming Congress, all the delegates in the DAP, our party system is like that. The delegates will elect 20 Central Executive Committee, meaning that we call CEC members. So now we enlarge this CEC, the numbers. we have another 10 packs. Okay, another compulsory women. They must choose the women to fill up this 10 seats. That means in future for the DAP, our Supreme Council, maybe you call Supreme Council, we have 1/3. That means we have 30 packs. 1/3 of them are women. So it's just like what Benedict, what you have suggested. That is at the party level. And prior to that, you see, you must understand that for DAP, all this while we have been in opposition. You know, a lot of people very scared to join opposition. They link it to go to jail and all these things. And in order to encourage our local branches, because most of them are men, the grassroots men, it was about 15 years ago, we amended the party constitution. For every branch, we put in this position called Women's Affairs Secretary. So to force every branch, they must somehow they must go to find one woman member and fill up that position. So when we started implementing that time, some branches don't even have one woman. Can you imagine that? They have to go and fill in men's name. So we have to, in our headquarters level, we send back the form. Because for every year AGM, they have to fill out the form for us to submit to registrar of societies. So we kick the form back to them. No, we don't accept to put men as a woman affairs secretary. You must go to look for a woman to fill out that quota. So slowly now we see that there are more women in the party, because this is an awareness process for the whole party, that we want our male and members go around to recruit more women to join the party, so that at least that position they can fill up. Okay, another thing I talk about quota, that it come back to what I say just now. Sometimes, we women, we always think of quota. We have the quota mentality until people fail to see that you are capable. Actually, many of us we are capable, but because we let people see that, I frankly speaking, 30 years ago when I joined the DAP, that was what the men talk. The men, those senior leaders in the party. Oh, good, you come in, you can be the wanita lah. If you revive the wanita, this and that. It's always the quota, for women. I think it comes to the time that where, men and women, if we can go to university together, and now in university, in campus, there are more women than men. There are more women professors than men. There are more women lecturers than men. So, what's if we don't have that many women in politics? We have to ask ourselves what went wrong. That means the society, most women, they are still feel very distant from politics. I give you an example. I do not know, Michelle and Kasturi, have you go to check your Facebook? You will see the breakdown of the races, or people who follow you are from which country and all that. You go to check the gender. Do you know that for my Facebook, I have close to 200,000 friends. 80% are men, So I do not know about Kasturi and Michelle. You go to check. That means the women are not interested even to follow my Facebook. So what do women want? The women will follow the film star, Andy Lau, all the handsome men, film star, their Facebook. They're not really interested in the women politician, unlike you people. At this odd hour, you come in and have Zoom, to listen to our stories. Not that many women, but I do not know how many. You have how many joined this Zoom now? 20. How many?
28 at the moment. It's fluctuating from 30 as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that means some of them find boring and then they leave. They left. So that shows us that a lot of women, they are not interested. This is not, politics is not their cup of tea. They are more interested maybe with fashion, with movies, with entertainment, with how to marry a good husband, a rich man, and so on. So these are our challenges, frankly speaking. And then another thing I want to stress on is that I must say that Kasturi, because her father, is a bit And also, we have very few Indian women joining the DAP at that time. So she came in, for her to elevate and now become MP, it's not an issue. For Michelle, you are, in Selangor. So in Selangor, PJ, Subanjaya, so our party members and all that, they are more open-minded. But when you go to rural area, you want to find women to come up will be a bit difficult, challenging. I would like to encourage for all you, if you are interested in politics, just come in and work from the grassroots first. I mean, it's same like me. I come into the party, work in the party headquarters, work from grassroots. You perform well, definitely the party will promote you. Especially you want more women candidates, because in a political party, you need to really touch the ground. You need to be socialize with your grassroots members and so on. You need to spend time with your grassroots member, including your supporters. So it's always good that you come in, work from the grassroots, then you slowly be promoted up because you are active. I would like to encourage maybe some of you, if you are interested, three of us are from DAP. You can join the DAP. We work from the grassroots, join as a party branch member, then slowly, and you take initiative to be more hardworking, then you'll be promoted. That will be more convincing for a lot of grassroots members. Okay, so
I just want to add on to YB Teresa's point. Actually, what she said is very true. On my Facebook page also, it's about 70-80% are men who are following. So I think that applies, almost entirely across the board. But if it's true for Saudari Teresa, it will be true for most of the women out there. But besides that, I think to address Benedict's point, a quota system works when your base is ready. So I say this because what Saudari Teresa said about where the AP is today being able to amend our constitution. Imagine if you did that 20 years ago, you force that system, you actually break the party because there's no way you would be able to fulfill it. Yet the party was very wise in the sense that they knew where the party was at and they knew how much to push it to be able to make them uncomfortable enough to achieve a certain objective and then push it a little bit further. Because you have to realize the reality of systems. Systems, you want to change them, you cannot shock it. Because the moment you shock it, you will actually take 5 steps back from where you are now. So if you talk about where the AP is today, the reason why we can amend our constitution to say you must have 10 women in the CEC is because we have so many who are so capable. I've seen the candidate list. Even I am torn as to which women that I want to vote for because they're all so good. You see, and so the base is ready. And so, but when we allow the system to work naturally as it is, we don't see that many women coming forward. And so that is where the party was wise enough to say, okay, now it is time for change. Let's push it a little bit more. Let's push it a little bit more. And I think in addressing where our society is today, we also must apply that same type of wisdom. As much as we want 50%, we have to also ask ourselves whether it is wise to push for it now and whether it would instead be counterintuitive and it would damage our current system instead. We have to be, in my view, we have to be very, very mindful of that.
Thank you very much to YB Michelle and to YB Teresa as well as Benedict for incorporating that question. Could we quickly bring in Eugene, who would like to ask all of you a question?
Hello. So first of all, I really am inspired by all your talks previously. I really enjoyed that. So that's like a very small question which I want to ask is how did all of you kind of overcome racism? And do you have any feedback on this? Not necessarily racism, but because like all of you guys are women and some are like Chinese and they are Indians as well for YB. So yeah, I really want to know like, yeah, because you guys are like very successful. So I don't know like how did you guys overcome this and any feedback on this?
Okay, Eugene, I like that question because when it comes to racism, so you imagine that it would be, for me, non-Chinese who would be making comments about my ethnicity. Actually, the opposite is true for me. When I try to demonstrate what it is like to be a Malaysian, and I give you a very simple example. During every Ramadan, I will go down to all the mosques and all the surahs in my kawasan to break fast with them. All right. And when you go into a mosque, you go into a place of worship, I think it is only right to respect their beliefs. And so if they in their belief you have to wear a tudong, cover your head, I think it is only appropriate to do that, because otherwise you'll be disrespecting them, and immediately that door is closed, and that's just not wise at all. And so you wear your baju kurung, and those kind of things. So for me, it's respecting other people. Yet when I post photos of this on my social media, I actually have my Chinese supporters, my Chinese voters telling me that I've gone overboard. And they say that when you do these kind of things, you shouldn't wear a tudung. Wear baju kurung is enough already. So I think the opposite is true. And when you talk about racism in Malaysia, I don't think we can only talk of it from the point of our ethnicity, our race. I think there is a bigger question of what is actually the Malaysian identity, and how do we craft it, how do we cultivate it, so much so that we recognize this mutual respect. And this mutual respect doesn't mean that I'm eroding on what I am, who I am. It is a respect of who that person is. And I can still be a Chinese, I can still be a Christian. It doesn't mean that if I go into a Muslim place of worship or into a temple, that I succumb, that narrative, I succumb to their religion and I become someone else who I am not supposed to be. I don't think that's necessarily it. But how I overcome it is like what Saudari Teresa said, we face it lah. We take the bull by the horns, we address it, and explain to the people why it is necessary we do what we do, because that kind of conversation is necessary to bring our society from where it is to where we want them to be. Yeah, so it's just as simple as that.
Okay, I think I need to take a leave now.
Sure.
So I'm very happy to see all our women here. Young women here, you are interested with what we are doing, as Michelle and I have seen that our Facebook, 80% are men following us. Maybe you can start following us in our Facebook, and then we can always communicate. You got our email and so on. If after the COVID, if the pandemic is over, you think that you want to have a teh tarik kind of session with us, which in the past we do, we go to the coffee shop and then, invite students, 30 of you to have face-to-face kind of conversation. But we can always do that. Okay, so thank you for inviting me. We keep in touch,
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much for being Teresa. Have fun at the birthday party.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I also have to leave, so I'll leave you in the good hands of Saudari Kasturi, who has many, much more interesting stories than what we have to tell. Yeah, so I'll see you guys. Keep in touch. My email is everywhere. So just drop by a line anytime. Yeah.
Thank
Cool.
you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Proceeding on with the questions, we're very sorry that the Q&A session is quite lengthy as well. So Sophie Chai, as mentioned in the chat, has a question directed to YB Kasturi, and to Nadia as well. Very sorry about that. Besides applying for internships, what can we do to prepare for a career in politics?
I think it's important. So politics is all about being a part of a political movement, a political party. I think those who are keen on being a part of this should read up on the manifesto, on what the party, the constitution of the party rather, and what the party stands for. And if that gels with what you believe in, and that's what you see yourself doing, and you find that it doesn't contradict what you believe in and your principles, then you should sign up to be a member of that party. You should volunteer at events. You should, apart from like what you said, to be an intern in an MP or ADUN's office, I think it's important to also be seen to be participating in political activities, particularly now where it's easier to be on Zoom. So yeah, and also to a lot of the online news portals also encourage people to write in opinion pieces, and you can start by doing that. And I think what's important is that you also increase your general knowledge by reading up on issues that are close to your heart, political issues, and take an interest in what else is happening in the world, in the country, in your state, in your district, in your kampong. So I think at the end of the day, it's not just for politics, but it's also for other things that you want to do. Is for you to put yourself out there, to show, like, for example, if I have not just an intern but someone who visibly shows that they are interested in what I do, who follows me either on social media or attends events, meetings, and all that, then I see that kind of potential. And always be brave to ask questions, question things that you don't know, you don't agree with, and to keep the conversation going, because a question that a young person, a young female, a young male has on his or her mind is very likely also on the minds of many other young people as well. So ask questions, engage with discussions among your peers, engage with discussions among leaders of political parties as well. So that, and different leaders, so that you can get different refreshing views from everyone as well. So sometimes the issues that you champion are not very popular, they're not mainstream. So sometimes you can be very alone in the kind of subjects that you pick, and you should be prepared for it. If it is not popular now, it will be popular in time to come. 20, 30 years ago, I don't know if some of y'all were even born, environmental issues were not as popular, and only a handful of people wanted to talk about environmental issues and champion environmental issues. But today, there is a call whether the subject of climate change will be included in the syllabus of the Malaysian education system. We've come to that state now. Everybody wants to be a part of the green footprint movement. Everybody wants to be a part of saving the planet. Everybody 2 or 3 decades. So it's important to keep yourself abreast with what is happening, but being an intern will actually give you the insight of what an MP or Adun's life actually is. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, YB Kasturi. Yeah, I do agree with you. In fact, like quite often in collectivist societies, especially within the ASEAN region, we have had it extremely hard to speak about politics, current affairs, and especially with like environmental issues as well. It is important, as you mentioned, to be engaged in conversations, you know, in order to remove the stigma. So thankfully, we are given more opportunities thanks to representatives like yourself, especially as a woman in politics as well. So we would also like to add on to another question, as mentioned by Layla. She would like to know your answers regarding how you handle racism in Malaysia, or perhaps like in a political scene. YB Kasturi, are you still there?
Yes, I think I kind of lost all of y'all for a while, and then I had to log out and come back in. I'm so sorry.
No worries, ma'am. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
All right, sure. It's just an extension to the question regarding racism in Malaysia, especially for in a political field. Layla would like to ask you, how do you handle it?
So it was. I must share with you, you know, some other stories. You know, before I move on to my own personal experience. When my father contested for a state assembly seat in Gopeng, and his opponent was a MCA candidate at that time. And during the campaign, one of the narratives that was used by the MCA candidate was, and every time he would for his ceramah, he would point at my father's poster, campaign poster, and said, "You see this face on the poster? It's black, isn't it? If you vote for him, that's going to be the color of your future. It's going to be black also." So that was the narrative that was used at that time. But he was someone. My late father was someone who was very very approachable, very easy, very hardworking, truly a man on the ground, and you know, and his flair for language was just par excellent, and that attracted a lot of people. You know, your regular man on the street, particularly in a place like Gopeng, to you know, they were immediately drawn to him, attracted to his persona and the way he carried himself and the way he spoke. Benedict just asked, "Is MCA Malaysian Chinese Association?" Yes, that's the one. But fast forward to 2013 when I became an MP, it's been a constant, you know, I wouldn't say a struggle, because you know, I anticipate this kind of language, which is very bad. And of course, the recent episode that happened in July this year was when Baling MP made a sexist and racist remark against me. You know, about my skin color, saying that I was dark and asked me to use powder, you know, on my face. But you see that this sort of very casual language that they speak, that coffee shop talk, is brought into parliament. You know, I mean, we all make jokes at each other, friends, when you sit over coffee, over a meal, over a drink at family gatherings. But the kind of language that is spoken, you know, crass and you know, offensive, is brought into the August House, and I think that's really something that no one should tolerate for. But I must also say that someone like Baling, and you know, the setting, the environment of parliament is that you have the speaker who is supposed to manage the ecosystem of the house. And when the speaker fails to do that, then you allow potty-mouthed MPs in the future to commit this sort of offense again and again. Baling called me Pondan in 2015. But it was during a debate, and it was at night, 8 something, I think. So maybe not many media were around and they didn't pick it up. But the fact is, from time to time, women in parliament, in state assembly, are subject to this kind of ridiculous language, you know, and it's intolerable. But this time, what happened to me gained so much of national, there was an outcry and outburst. And I think it is also because many young people, many women, took the time to sit in front of their TV or their laptops or their telephones to watch the parliamentary sitting, the first day of the sitting after the change of regime. And I think this says a lot because more people saw that this was the language that was spoken in parliament. It's not an isolated case. Baling, MP for Baling is a repeat offender, and he's not alone. There are other MPs who speak like him as well. But what in the beginning, when I used to be labeled and called names, of course, I would immediately react to it, and I'll be very offended, and it would follow me for days on end, and But over time, what remains is my reaction. I pick my battles, and I craft my reply and my response at that time. But what is important is that there's a reaction. And over the years, I look at it as an opportunity for me to use this as an example to educate people out there. Time and time again, elected reps from the DAP, particularly women elected reps, when we go to the surau, when we go to the masjid, whether it is for Ramadan, whether it's for Idul Fitri, whether it is for sometimes back to school programs that we normally do if we get aid from Pusat Urus Zakat, is to ensure that you confer the same respect that you give the mosque or the surau or the Hindu temple or the Chinese temple or the church as you would do for your own faith. Or even if you didn't have a faith, then that would be the right thing to do, the decent thing to do, So we take the trouble and we want others to see, because as a female elected rep, when you use your scarf and your baju kurung and your tudung to go into a masjid or surau, then the team with you will know that, oh, this is something that we need to do as well. But if you don't do that, then you are setting a very bad precedence and a very bad example for young people to follow as well. So it's very important that we also set that tone and set that standard, and this is common sense as well. So it is hard and it is quite annoying as well. But I think what is important is that often these days I call out racists on social media, especially if someone makes all these derogatory comments, which I'm very, very used to. But sometimes I want to make an example, so I take a screenshot and sometimes I blur out their names, sometimes I don't, but I post it on my wall and I say, this is the language of how somebody speaks to another person. It doesn't matter if I'm an MP or not, but this is how bad how low you put yourself to address a person on an issue that may or may not directly involve you as well. But yeah, and when you speak to somebody like this, what are you teaching your children? If your son or your daughter watches you, hears you or sees you speak in this way. So sometimes it is one or two have actually apologized, and they said they actually didn't mean it. Some have actually reached out and asked me what I actually meant. This is all after being exposed on social media and getting like a barrage of comments back. Sometimes they normally tend to say sorry and all that, but often it's different in real life. The language on social media and how people are on social media are greatly different from how people are when you meet them outside. There was one time when I was actually debating in Parliament and I was questioning the former Minister of Home Affairs, Datuk Sri Zaid Hamidi, about his involvement in bringing in foreign workers into the country. Clearly, there was some discrepancy and questionable procedures and documents on it. And I was really having a go at him. And it was just before lunch. And when we stopped for lunch, and I was in the MP lounge, and he walked in, and he just came up to me and tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Hello, Batu Kawan, how are you? How is your mother?" And I'm like, dude, I just roasted you in Parliament just now, And like, and I just stood up and I was like, oh, she's very well, Datuk Sri, and yourself, how are you? How's your constituency? And that kind of talk. But yeah, so sometimes it's different on social media, and even in Parliament, it's different as well. But to me, it's a learning experience because it tells me that there's still so much of racism, even for people who preach to be anti-racist. There's so much of racism there as well. Those who want equality also don't want to give up that little bit of that identity politics, so we have a long way to go, and the future is in the hands of young people like all of y'all here. How do you want to frame the narrative of what Malaysia in the future is? And also, I must note, I hate using the word tolerant society. Oh my God. It's what is tolerant? It's like, your tolerance level for spice, your tolerance level for pain when you go to the dentist. There's a threshold, and if you cross that line, there will be a reaction. And it irks me that leaders and even media, TV, radio, social media, they tend to use the word, oh, we live in a tolerant society, we have to tolerate, bertoleransi. Oh, come on, it's not about that. It's about respect. It is about acceptance. It's about learning about other cultures' beliefs, and that's what it is. It's living in a cohesive society, not saying that we live in a tolerant society. Tolerant means that you have a noisy neighbor and you're going to tolerate up to that level. And when the noise level goes up, you will react. And your reaction is very likely to call the police in. So this is, and you're talking about race issues and religion issues and gender issues and using the word tolerate there. We'll only tolerate 10 women to speak. We'll tolerate only 30 women to be here. That's dangerous, and that's what we've all grown up listening to in school. Masyarakat yang saling toleransi di antara satu sama lain. Oh, no. So when I go for forums or conferences and when organizers use the word, I tell them, this is the last time the word tolerance should ever be used when you speak about gender issues, race issues, religion issues, and human rights issues. No. Yeah. And I think that's the future. It's very difficult. It may be very new and alien to some people, but that's the way forward. You cannot live in a tolerant society. You must live in a accepting, harmonious, respectable society. I noticed a question now that asks what are the languages do we debate in Parliament? So the lingua franca in Parliament and all the state assemblies except Sarawak and maybe even Sabah is the national language, Bahasa Melayu. Of course, you can always quote and cite information or headings or anything that you want to say in English just for greater understanding, but it must be dengan izin. In Sabah and Sarawak, I believe you can debate in English in the state assembly. But in all other state assemblies in the country, it's the national language.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kasturi. On behalf of our community, we would like to extend our apologies for how you've been treated, especially with the derogatory remarks that you have received. It is truly a shame that as Malaysians, we have normalized racist remarks despite being in a cosmopolitan country as this. We should definitely not be tolerant and desensitized to racism. Let's make that extremely clear. We need far more respect and reformation in our society, as you've mentioned. So once again, thank you very much for standing up against racism and being a great role model for all of us.
I must add something. So a great shout out to Parliament Belia candidate for representing the constituency of Baling. He actually tried to reach out to me on social media, on Twitter, I believe, and the MP for Parliament Digital, my apologies. So the MP for Parliament Digital for Baling apologized for the behavior of the real MP of Baling in Parliament and said that he doesn't reflect the people of Baling, and the people of Baling reject the language and the decorum of their MP, which I found so refreshing. And I actually retweeted and said, you know what? Your MP should actually emulate what you just did, because you've actually shown him that you have more class, far more standard, and more decorum than he will ever have in the August House. And I think this is extremely refreshing and courageous for a young person like him to call out an MP from the ruling party. For something that he has said in Parliament. And I look forward to this kind of engagements. I think young people, you should hold your elected reps accountable. the naming of shaming. I remember there was a time that Datuk Sri Najib, when he was Prime Minister, and also at that time when he was Minister for Women's Affairs, if you remember, because Senator, one of the senators was, she resigned, and she was Minister, Sharizat Jalil was a senator, and she was Minister for Women's Affairs. And then when her term came to an end and she resigned, there was a vacuum. And in Barisan Nasional, they didn't have anyone else. So they appointed the Prime Minister, who was also Finance Minister, as Minister for Women's Affairs. And Najib made this bold statement of naming and shaming companies that didn't have women or more women in decision-making positions. But I think we need to up the ante a little bit and name and shame elected reps who make derogatory remarks in Parliament, sexist remarks in Parliament, racist remarks in Parliament. Like in this sitting, even the MP for Puncak Borneo showing his middle finger. And he's a repeat offender. I spoke to another MP and he said that the MP for Puncak Borneo actually showed his middle finger to his brother outside, the MP's brother outside Parliament. That's another story for another day, maybe. But it shows that you bring this vile behavior and attitude into the August House. I'm constantly reminded that I'm privileged and blessed to be in this position, and it's an honor to represent the voices of my constituents in Batu Kawan and the country. In Parliament, we are the 222 out of the 31 million Malaysians, man. Can you beat that? And you bring your rubbish language into Parliament and your coffee shop talk, and please, we need more young people to come in with higher standards to for Malaysia to be regarded as a world-class parliament. How do we do that when we have this kind of potty-mouthed MPs in Parliament? So you guys, we're really rooting for you. Thank you for all the support that you're giving us, all the dinosaurs like me in Parliament. But then remember that y'all are the hope, that the support y'all give us, and we hope that we inspire you enough for you to say, okay, your time's up, move over. That one day a young person is going to represent the constituency of Parliament Batu Kawan. I will not be MP forever. And I look forward to, a young person, whether it is male or female I hope, to be able to bring the voices of Batu Kawan and Malaysia to the Malaysian Parliament one day.
Thank you very much for that, YB Kastu. Also, speaking of young people in our society and everything, we also have Miss Nadia here, who is going to be given a question, which is, as you've mentioned earlier, Miss Nadia, that the coalition system, sorry, that's the wrong question. I'm so sorry about that. So, as you've mentioned, pardon me, religion is integrated into Malaysian politics, which potentially hinders and restricts women from any political participation or perhaps from achieving her ambitions. Would you believe that this generation onwards has the potential to politically reform our system, perhaps with more opportunities to that do not discriminate gender?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I generally believe that this generation do have a chance, but we might not see the fruits of it ourselves. It might be for like our sisters, our children. And with regards to religious sentiment, being a hindrance or a barrier, for me, I can only speak for Malay Muslim women, because I'm from the community, and as I've mentioned before, I spent at least 11 years in the religious school system. In Malay, it's Sekolah Kebangsaan Agama, which for non-Malaysians, basically you still use the same curriculum, but you have additional religious subjects, and you also learn a bit of Arabic as well. But it's also separate from the state-funded religious schools. So basically, some of the more frequent counter arguments that I've heard are like the usage of actual like Quran, which is our holy book, verses, and then the Prophet's sayings to say that, oh, you know, women cannot lead, women cannot be in positions of power because, you know, the interpretation for this verse means that women are less, women are more emotional, women are weak-minded. But I mean, you know, currently we have one of the biggest cabinets ever, and I think more than half of the members are men. So I don't think they're doing a great job. So it's only because we have this, like, especially for Malay Muslims, like, we have this mentality that men have to be at the forefront of everything. You know, even in inheritance law, say for example, if the deceased did not do a will, so the inheritance will automatically be divided via the faraid system. So under that system, like, girls actually get less than men because historically men have been the caretakers of women. But then in the modern context, you know, it's very different. And then because women now earn money, or even if they don't earn money, they do a lot of like care work. So I think these are the kind of things that, like, for me, my work has to like counter, because as much as we can say that young Malaysians are more progressive, you know, more open, for me, just because from my own personal experience and from like the kind of environment that I grew up with, not necessarily family environment, because I think for a bunch of parents who sent me to religious school for whatever reason, they were quite liberal. Just in the environment that I find myself in. So unfortunately, like, you have to do more work to convince the more hardline people. And I think for these reasons, like, current opposition parties such as DAP and PKR, you don't have to push so much. So we tend to engage with them a bit less. In fact, in GE14, actually, DAP had like 100% win rate in the election. So basically, like, all the female candidates that they fielded all won, which I think it's quite impressive because PKR only had like 76% win rate, and UMNO has 66% win rate. So I think like opposition parties don't really have like that much of a problem. It's just, I think, consistency. Even I think the state of Penang they did the Sidang Wanita event, which I think YB Kasturi like has spoken about, and they're trying to implement a minimum 30% quota for like women reps, which I hope other states would follow suit, like especially for Sarawak, because my experience in Sarawak has always been like, you know, except for the elected reps from DAP, all the other women elected reps are like, they're usually taking over the late husband's seat or like someone in their family seat. So it's very it's very insular, and I think like only speaking for like my own, the people that I know, the people that I grew up with, they feel a bit apathetic about politics and participating in politics. So yeah, I basically I do think that it's possible for us to change, but there are certain segments of society that you need to do more work for that to for them to make it happen, because like unfortunately, because of Malaysia's composition, you know, the conservatives or the conservatives who don't know they're conservatives until they go out to vote dominate the society. So I think the latter group is a bit easier to convince. Yeah, basically that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nadia, for your insights. So based on the form that we have so far, the highlighted and reoccurring issues and challenges faced by women in politics, or perhaps as a social issue, would be religious or sexist or racist issues faced at the moment. What would the both of you propose would be our other current issues that we are facing, and what are the contributing factors to those current issues?
I think sometimes it's a case of just a political fatigue right now, if you want to look at the Malaysian political scenario, and also maybe a sense of disillusionment. There's too much of what many would say bickering, on social media, even on news portals on the media, and also mainstream media as well. There's also maybe a feeling of discouragement, and sometimes politics it's a game of optics. When you see a whole lineup of men who are MPs or elected reps, or basically leaders of a party or a movement, then that sort of plays in the mind of people, generally young women. How would I look in a setting like that? How would I fit in a scenario like this, etc., in an environment like this? And that could inadvertently discourage them. Whether it's worth the trouble, whether it's worth the struggle, whether it's worth the journey. Yeah. So I think that. And also, of course, you have to create the sort of platform. And Nadia rightfully mentioned about our Sidang Wanita. We're the first state in the country to ever organize a Sidang like this, which was first time ever in the history of the country, where we had 40 women. We the setting was exactly like the Dewan Undangan Negeri setting. We had a speaker, we had a chief minister, opposition leader, excos, backbenchers, etc. And all these women lived up to their roles. It was so surprising, because for lunch break, many of the excos had just a bite to eat and came back to the Dewan to start preparing for their ucapan penggolongan. And I was like, you guys really take this very seriously, yeah? And I was so impressed. In fact, as I heard them debating, asking questions and answering, I was really emotional, like tearing up and trying not to cry and make a scene, But and I was sitting next to the Adun for Sungai Pinang, YB Lim Sukim, and I told her, I said, come on, man, I really feel like crying, like, look at them, and these are your women, what they would never have thought that they would be able to debate that way. But yeah, but we must remember that, one day in politics is very long already. And if you want to be active in politics and to want to make a difference, and to want to see the difference, and to want to bring about that change, then you have to be consistent. We've spoken about so many issues for so long. For 20 years, civil society has been speaking about a sexual harassment bill outside Parliament. And yesterday, I was privileged to be given a chance to read out a petition for the sexual harassment bill. But if it has taken 20 years, I don't know if some of y'all were born or maybe even toddlers at that age. That's sometimes how long it's going to take, or maybe even longer. And it is at the end of the day, you have to be able to envision it happening and then work towards that. And then along the way, increase your army and get more people to speak about it, on board with what you want to talk about. But so having said that, I must apologize if I have to leave now. And 50 of your students signed that bill. Well done. Awesome. Good, great. So yeah, we hope that more young people will also keep the subject alive from now until the next sitting in March, which we hope will happen if there's no dissolution of Parliament. So all the best to everyone here. I hope you have gained a little bit of knowledge, a bit of insight to our personal experiences, our lives, being an elected rep, the challenges, the stories. Of course, it's not enough if you have two other excellent speakers like YB Teresa and YB Michelle. Then perhaps we could have another session. That Teh Tarik session sounds really good. And as CMCO eases in some areas, maybe we can catch up in smaller groups and have a chat about it. You're most welcome to everyone and for all your questions. And we'll keep in touch. And all the best and keep the faith. So I'm going to be prepping for my next webinar after this. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, YB Kasturi. Good luck with your next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Yep. All right, so as we are nearing to the end of our event, let us open up the floor to Ms. Nadia here. We would like to welcome all participants to ask her any questions.
It's just me, guys. I can probably speak a bit on the activist context. I do agree with YB Kasturi that political apathy and disillusionment is sinking in even among activists. But like she said, politics is a very long game. Only 18. The idea of only 18 has been mooted since Lim Kit Siang started off as a parliamentarian. So that's how long that idea has been around. But it only became a reality last year, and it hasn't been fully enforced yet. So it's a very long game, unfortunately. And I do think that one of the best ways to explore politics is always to intern directly with a politician that you admire. I tried that, but I did not manage that. So I ended up interning with a party. That may or may not be a good decision depending on what kind of person you are, I guess. Because for some people, they immediately choose to join a party, like a political party, without much hesitation. I'm not that kind of person, unfortunately, so I went back to activism. So I think another way is always to try to find a cause that you genuinely believe in and champion it. Which is what I did with Undi 18, I think. My experience with Undi 18, so basically the founders are actually my friends. I've known them since I was at university. So that's 4 to 5 years ago. But as I said, I wasn't a student activist. I wasn't particularly active in university. So I only started joining when I came back to Malaysia for a gap year, which turned into 2 years, and I ended up quitting university. But that's another story. So I think it has been an interesting experience because I get to meet and interact with a lot of people. I actually think it's a privilege for me because I like to think that I live a relatively sheltered life. So like working with a NGO is a way for you to like widen your outlook in life. And I think unfortunately because of the COVID situation, we can't do much of the like offline engagement. I always think that offline engagements are actually a lot better than doing online, because one thing that I've observed while helping out with the other campaigns is that the audience for our online programs tend to be the same people, even when they're joining events for different campaigns. So you get the same, like you retain the same amount of people who join, but how do you like expand and how do you push that to include other people? Because for like an NGO like us, a lot of our audience tend to be like urban suburbanites, those who can at least speak English very well and have a decent command of Malay. So like a thing that we've been trying to do is opening up all the other campaigns for more people beyond Klang Valley, and trying to produce more content beyond like English and Malay, because essentially you are speaking to the choir, you are preaching to the choir. So it doesn't like it's not a good thing for an advocacy group, because the idea is always to reach out to more people and be able to engage them.
That's actually really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Would you say that demographic is the main thing that could possibly hinder or enhance one's activism campaigns?
Yeah, I think it could like hinder or enhance, especially if you start out online. There is a very huge risk that you would only appeal to like certain groups, especially if it's something that you start out with your friends, you know, or like you concentrate on a certain medium. Like I'm not sure like how well versed you guys, but I think in the last few months there has been a trend of like Instagram carousel infographics. I mean, it's a good way to pull in people, but you can't just like stop there. You can't just do that. You have to like, ultimately you have to get people to read more, you have to engage them, because advocacy is also about, you know, two-way engagement. It cannot be passive.
Indeed, like advocacy is not just, you know, for the moment, it's a permanent movement. You know, you're potentially shaping your future, and it is very commemorable of you to continue your activism and whatnot. Also, just a side question, as you've mentioned that most of the people that are targeted for the activism and whatnot are people who can communicate in perhaps English and Bahasa. Is that correct, Nadia?
Yeah.
With that being said, what else are the additional factors to the algorithm, like age or gender? Like what exactly is it per se?
Like most of the people who've actively followed us, they usually have like at least decent connectivity, which for me, because I'm from Sarawak, like connectivity is actually a barrier. Even though everything's moved online. So that's one thing. It's also in terms of demographic as well. Like currently our main reach is like people around like SPM, like 17 to like younger, like mid-20s. Like even in the Undi 18 team itself, like our oldest staff is like 28 or 27. So we're very not very young. We're still quite young, but I think another thing that we've also considered is that how do you keep engaging young people even as you get older and eventually age out? Like for me, I'm very acutely aware that I will age out very soon because I have a 12-year-old sister. So as she gets older, I will age out this youth space. So what can I do to keep engaging them as I think keep engaging as individuals of their own, but also being mindful of the age, because I think that a lot of young people can understand very big concepts. It just takes a bit more time and a bit more context, which for some people, unfortunately, you receive that context when you grow older.
Thank you very much for all of that. In fact, I think it is very inspiring that, as someone who is so young, you are very accomplished and very involved with activism, which not a lot of people would use that privilege and opportunity. So thank you very much for that. And also, I would like to ask, would anyone else like to ask Ms. Nadia any questions?
So it's it's a bit awkward for me because I'm just a few years older than you guys.
It's refreshing. It's very refreshing and inspiring to all of us because it does give us a sense of direction and hope that, as young as we are, we could definitely make a difference and contribute positively to society. So you are that beacon of hope for us. So thank you.
I feel like that's a very huge responsibility.
Given with the responsibility, I would imagine it's a lot of pressure for you.
I think for me, it's just I think the moment I started actually working with UnDi 18, I had to be more mindful of how I use social media because I'm very active on Twitter. Because I do notice that our founders, Kira and Karma, they are very active online. So they get a lot of responses. But unfortunately, the responses to Kira are often violent and angry. And even before I've joined UnDi 18, because of my because of just how outspoken I am, I've been targeted for attacks. So I think that's a very huge challenge, even though I'm not a sitting MP or I don't YB Kasturi and YB Michelle. So ultimately, I do hope that the sexual harassment bill will eventually get passed, because a thing that I think do prevent women from taking up more public space is because the moment you speak up, your safety is threatened, and the kind of threats that you get as a woman is often bodily threats, rape threats. I have enough screenshots from the last 2 years, and this is coming from me who hasn't been in that space for very long. So yeah, I do think that safety is a concern, and boundary setting is also a thing. It's what YB Kasturi has said. Sometimes you just some days you really have to pick your battles, but sometimes you can make examples out of people just to show that this is not a behavior that you will accept.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nadia, for sharing that. In fact, on behalf of all of us, I would just like to say I'm very sorry that you are going through all those threats. It is definitely not acceptable, and you will have your justice. All of that. We just wanted to reassure you with that. Also, because we are nearing the end of it, I would like to pass over to our PR officer and organizer of the event, Reshna.
All right, thank you so much. That was a very thought-provoking session. I hope the audience has gained valuable insights on the status of women in Malaysian politics and the importance of gender-responsive political agenda. So I want to give a big thanks to the panelists for participating in the forum. Thank you, Nadia, being that you're the only one left.
You're only one left.
It's okay, but thank you so much for your time and for your patience, especially since we had to accommodate to the YBs because they had previous engagements that they had to attend. So as our token of appreciation, we would like to present you with a letter of appreciation, which I will send you via WhatsApp myself. So thank you so much for coming. And I would like to thank the audience as well for attending the session. Stay safe, everyone, and early Christmas and New Year greetings. And if you can, please do fill up the feedback form that I have posted in the chat. I will post it again. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. See you for the next
so much for hanging through at the end, even though I'm not a adun, or MP.
All right, you can
I hope to see you guys in the NGO or activist scene very soon.
Well, thank you very much once again, and we really appreciate the fact that you're actively involved in our societies and communities to help each and every one of us. I'm pretty sure Sarawak is very grateful for your patronage as well, so thank you. All right, so please stay safe, everybody, and happy holidays. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, Alia.